Looking at the point spread for every playoff game in NFL history, we find that the favorites have over 2 times as many playoff wins as the underdogs. And as the spread gets larger, the chance of an underdog pulling off an upset gets even lower. Major upsets are defined as games where a team that is favored by 7 or more points loses. Of the playoff games with spreads over 7 points, the underdog pulled off the major upset less than a quarter of the time. But among these major upsets are some of the more memorable moments in playoff history. Mark Sanchez's AFC Championship run, Tim Tebow's 80-yard walk-off to Demaryius Thomas, and Marshawn Lynch's Beastquake run all culminated in major upsets for their respective teams. But it doesn't happen often. On average, there's fewer than 1 major upset per year, but certain teams are more prone to major upsets than others. The Cowboys have been on the losing side of 6 major playoff upsets. No other team has more than 3. While the Cowboys have suffered the most major playoff upsets, they haven't suffered the worst. There have been 5 playoff games in which a team favored by 12 or more points lost to the underdog, each of them slightly more improbable than the next. We kick things off back in January of 1970, when the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs faced off against the NFL's Minnesota Vikings in Super Bowl IV. The Chiefs were going into the game as massive underdogs, in part because before the AFL-NFL merger, teams from the AFL were thought of as inferior compared to teams from the NFL. And on top of that, the Chiefs had already made an appearance in Super Bowl I a few years prior, which they lost against the heavily favored Packers 35-10. They were 14-point underdogs in that Super Bowl I matchup. In Super Bowl IV, they were only expected to lose by 12. Despite the odds stacked against them, the Chiefs, led by head coach Hank Stram and future Hall of Fame quarterback Len Dawson, quickly built an early 9-0 lead, thanks to Len Dawson's arm and Jan Stenerud's leg. On the ensuing kickoff, the Vikings fumbled the ball back to the Chiefs to set up this 5-yard touchdown by Mike Garrett to make it 16-0. The Vikings would get 1 touchdown back in the third quarter, but Vikings quarterback Joe Kapp threw 2 fourth-quarter interceptions to eliminate any possibility of a comeback. The Chiefs would go on to win that game 23-7, completely defying the predicted outcome. The Chiefs' Super Bowl title cemented the AFL as legitimate contenders in the sport. It was the last game before the AFL-NFL merger, and comes in as the 5th largest upset against the spread in NFL playoff history. Just ahead of Super Bowl IV is another Super Bowl, a more recent one, where Tom Brady and the undefeated New England Patriots went up against Eli Manning and the 5th-seeded New York Giants. The Giants were 12.5-point underdogs, and the only thing that stood between the Patriots and an undefeated season. Late in the fourth quarter, head coach Tom Coughlin's New York Giants found themselves down by just 4, when Eli Manning orchestrated one of the most iconic playoff drives in history, highlighted by David Tyree's helmet catch and Plaxico Burress' game-winning touchdown. While the Giants' Super Bowl win alone was enough to land them in the top 4 playoff upsets, their journey to the Super Bowl that year was even less probable. The 07-08 Giants playoff run produced not just 1 major upset, but 3, as they beat the heavily favored Cowboys and Packers in consecutive weeks before taking out the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Those 3 wins are the most major playoff upset wins by a team in a single season, and the New York Giants as a team have been on the winning side of major playoff upsets twice as many times as the next highest team. Eli Manning was the starting quarterback for 4 of those 6 major upsets, the most major playoff upset wins by a single quarterback. Ironically, his brother Peyton holds the record for being on the losing end of the most major playoff upsets, as Peyton has dropped 4 such games in his career. Which indirectly is a testament to just how good you have to be in order to be favored by a touchdown in a playoff game. The favored teams are often favored for a reason, and a lot of the losing quarterbacks in these major upsets are objectively great quarterbacks on objectively great teams. And the losing team on the next biggest upset had an objectively great quarterback on objectively the best team that year. The 2001 St. Louis Rams start a 1-2 punch in quarterback Kurt Warner and running back Marshall Faulk, who had combined to win the last 3 MVPs. They went into the Super Bowl as 14-point favorites, hoping to take advantage of a recently hired head coach and inexperienced quarterback. The Rams and Patriots had played earlier in the season in a Week 10 matchup in Foxborough, during which the Rams offense outclassed the Patriots. The Rams significantly outgained the Patriots offense, controlled the time of possession, and converted their third downs more efficiently. The result was a win for the Rams. In their rematch in the Super Bowl, the Rams significantly outgained the Patriots' offense, controlled the time of possession, and converted their third downs at a much higher rate. The result was a win for the Patriots. The different outcome between these two games boiled down to one thing. In the Super Bowl, the Patriots' defense forced 3 turnovers, including a 47-yard pick six, a fumble with less than 2 minutes in the first half that led to a field goal, and another interception returned well into St. Louis territory that led to another touchdown. The turnovers were too much to overcome, and Adam Vinatieri walked off the game on a 48-yard field goal in what would become the Super Bowl that kicked off the New England Patriots dynasty. In the 8 Super Bowl appearances the Patriots have made since then, they were underdogs only one other time, by 1 point against the Seahawks in 2014. But it all started with Tom Brady and the Patriots proving the odds makers wrong in 2001. Matching that 14-point spread is the 1996 divisional round game between the Jacksonville Jaguars and Denver Broncos. At the time, this was the second year of the Jaguars' existence. They finished 4-12 in their inaugural season, and then started the next one 4-7. But they went on a run in the second half of 1996, and won 5 straight games to make the playoffs. Their reward for those 5 straight wins was a date with the top-seeded Broncos in the divisional round. The Broncos had won 12 of their first 13 games that year, and had clinched the number 1 seed with time to spare in the regular season. While some speculated that the Broncos might have some rust due to resting their starters for the last couple of weeks, the Broncos showed no signs and jumped out to a quick 12-0 lead. But the Jaguars quickly cut into the lead, led by running back Natrone Means and quarterback Mark Brunell. By halftime, what started as a 12-point Broncos lead had turned into a 1-point Jaguars lead. But it wouldn't stay that way for long. The Jaguars scored a touchdown early in the third quarter to go up by 8. The ensuing kickoff was pretty emblematic of how the Broncos' day went. They were stumbling over themselves and making mistakes that a top seed shouldn't be making. Late in the third quarter, the Jaguars were gifted a first down when the Broncos got penalized for having 12 men on the field on a 4th down punt. The drive resulted in more points for Jacksonville, and at that point the Broncos were playing catch-up for the remainder of the game. Despite a Bronco touchdown with under 2 minutes to go, it was too little too late. The Jaguars completed the 14-point upset and sent John Elway home with what he would call the biggest loss of his life. While it was the biggest loss of Elway's life, it wasn't the biggest loss in NFL playoff history. For that honor, we have to go back to 1969. The New York Jets were facing off against the Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl III. In the years leading up to this game, several Jets players had been cut by the Colts. Even Jets head coach Weeb Ewbank, who won 2 championships with the Colts, ended up getting cut by the Colts a few years after his last championship run. Many thought that the Jets were just a ragtag team of NFL misfits who had nowhere else to go but the AFL. And this was a time where few thought that the AFL would stand a chance against the NFL's top team. The spread reflected that same sentiment and favored the Colts by 18 points. The Jets' game plan going into the game was to counter the Colts' blitz-heavy defense with a combination of the run and short, high-percentage passes to minimize interceptions. The Jets worked that game plan to perfection, completing short pass after short pass and methodically working their way into the Colts' end zone. By halftime, that touchdown was the difference in the game. The second half was more of the same. The Colts were unable to adjust to the Jets' offensive scheme, and Jim Turner tacked on 3 field goals to build the lead to 16. Johnny Unitas entered the game late in the third quarter for Baltimore, and put together a touchdown drive late in the fourth. But it was too late. The Jets defeated the NFL's top team and made good on Joe Namath's promise from a few days prior. The Jets paved the way for the AFL to truly compete with the NFL, and in doing so overcame the largest playoff spread ever to solidify themselves as the owners of the biggest upset in playoff history. Upsets and Cinderella stories keep sports entertaining, and when the playoffs come around, the magnitude of pulling off an upset increases. The impact of stringing together a few unexpected wins can do big things for the winning team. Whether it's starting one dynasty or ending another, upsets in the playoffs will continue to define eras and bring together cities to cheer for a team doing the impossible.